My God, I hate trucks.
Amid criticisms that the government is being passive in asserting its rights on the South China Sea, President Rodrigo Duterte reiterates his conviction that the country cannot win a war against China. Here's the president in his own words.
We cannot afford war. We cannot win a battle against China. And I would only lose maybe thousands of my troops and policemen.
The president adds he might fire another official when he returns to Malacanang. The president was speaking at the inauguration of the Davao River Bridge widening project in Davao City. Arnold Gonzalez has been named officer in charge of the Tourism Promotions Board, or TPB. The Tourism Department announced that the TPB Board of Directors unanimously chose Gonzalez. The 56-year-old career executive has been with the agency for 30 years. Gonzalez was OIC of TPB's Domestic Promotions Department. He takes on the agency's leadership after Cesar Montano resigned as Chief Operating Officer. Montano is in hot water for approving multi-million projects allegedly without proper bidding. These include Buhay Karinderya program, which promotes Filipino food stalls or roadside eateries. Senate President Tito Soto says that the bicameral conference committee report establishing the Philippine Identification System, or the National ID System, will be ratified on Monday. The committee approved the bill Tuesday night. The bill integrates 33 various government-issued IDs into a single official identification system for all citizens. The card would include a unique identification number and the cardholder's picture and basic information. This aims to make government transactions faster and more convenient. Soto is confident of its security features, which he says would help avoid irregularities in the 2019 elections.
I don't see any problem with it kasi candidates, especially in the local elections, elections. A plus factor is to secure a copy of the voters list. And the copy of the voters list is given by COMELEC. It was meticulously crafted by Senator Lacson.
Once ratified by both houses of Congress, Senator Ping Lacson says the bill goes to Malacanang for the president to sign into law. He says Congress targets to implement the system by the end of June. Here now are some of the top stories from around the world. North Korea has destroyed at least 3 nuclear tunnels, observation buildings, a metal foundry, and living quarters at its nuclear test site. International journalists observed the process. A CNN crew at the remote mountain site witnessed the destruction of nuclear tunnels 2, 3, and 4 from observation decks about 500 meters away. North Korea has conducted 6 nuclear tests at the site, the most recent in September 2017. Even as it destroys its nuclear site, North Korea is warning the U.S. of a nuclear showdown. That's if dialogue fails between Pyongyang and Washington. North Korea's state-run KCNA quoted Foreign Vice Minister Choi Son-hui. She reportedly said, quote, "Whether the U.S. will meet us at a meeting room or encounter us at a nuclear-to-nuclear showdown is entirely dependent upon the decision and the behavior of the United States." Meantime, the U.S. withdraws an invitation to China to what has been described as the world's largest international maritime warfare exercise. A Pentagon spokesman explains China's behavior is inconsistent with the principles of the Rim of the Pacific exercise. The comment comes after Beijing recently deployed missile systems and landed a Chinese bomber aircraft in the South China Sea. China called the U.S. decision unconstructive and unhelpful. Foreign Minister Wang Yi says China hopes the U.S. will change its negative mindset. The local government of Marawi and a United Nations agency signed a memorandum on rebuilding and rehabilitation efforts a year after the siege. George Cahilas tells us the armed forces is also reviving a unit to oversee security in the devastated city.
Malawi Beliante is among Marawi evacuees staying in this tent city. Her house in Ground Zero is by the lakeside, and she was informed that it may give way to a planned road construction.
Kasi yung bahay ko, mga 30 meters ata. Mga 30 meters from baka maano ng kalsada.
The government says residents like Beliante will be the priority beneficiaries of permanent shelter from the government. On Thursday, the city government of Marawi and the United Nations Human Settlement Program signed a memorandum. This will result in the construction of 1,500 housing units, 10 infrastructure projects like roads, water and sanitation facilities, and a multi-purpose center, and livelihood support for 4,000 households.
I also thank the people of Japan for providing significant support to the people of Marawi and the government of the Philippines in the amount of 1.1 billion Japanese yen. That's equivalent to $10 million or 500 million pesos.
Task Force Bangon Marawi says San Miguel Foundation also pledged to construct 2,000 permanent housing units for evacuees.
Yung permanent shelter, meron tayong 2 sites. We are now negotiating with the owners, and we are requesting them to give us the title or whatever documents they have as proof of ownership.
Task Force Bangon Marawi says once the government and project developer Bangon Marawi Consortium come up with a deal, the Swiss Challenge will take place beginning May 30th. And if everything goes well, groundbreaking for rehabilitation may begin June 21st. On the 2 Chinese companies that were once blacklisted by the World Bank, Task Force Bangon Marawi Chief Eduardo Del Rosario says it will not affect the process at all. He says the companies had served the penalty for bidding collusion.
It's open, it's transparent. In fact, it will be published in the national newspaper, the specifics of the project. So anybody in the Philippines can challenge the developer.
Meanwhile, the armed forces with all its commanders during Marawi siege returned to the city and promised to continue providing security throughout the rehabilitation work. The armed forces will revive its Joint Task Force Sanao, a combined unit that will oversee daily security.
That the armed forces of the Philippines will never leave Marawi. Hindi po namin kayo iwanan. Walang iwanan.
Residents like Beliante may oppose losing ancestral land to give way to development. But she says all that matters now is to live in peace and get back to normalcy in their homeland. From Marawi City, George Gales, CNN Philippines.
Consumers say they have to spend more money for fewer things as the prices of goods continue to rise. Some are blaming the increase on the recently passed Tax for Acceleration and Inclusion law, more commonly known as the train law. But the Finance Department says it is against repealing the law as called for by opposition lawmakers. It also says the government cannot suspend the fuel excise tax. This seems contrary to Malacanang's earlier pronouncement. Our Joyce Ilas tells us more.
Consumers just have to bear the impact of higher fuel taxes this year. Finance Undersecretary Carl Chua says the government cannot suspend the excise tax on fuel under the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion or TRAIN law.
There's also a provision in the TRAIN law that says that we cannot suspend the existing rate. We can only suspend the next increase if the condition is met.
Chua says what can be suspended is the second tranche of increase in the fuel excise tax in January 2019. But this can only happen when the average Dubai crude oil price reaches $80 per barrel from October to December this year, or 3 months before the next scheduled increase as provided by law. Dubai crude is currently nearing $75 per barrel. Some lawmakers, however, say suspending the next tranche of tax increase is not enough to cushion the tax reform law's impact on poor Filipinos, suffering from high prices of basic commodities. They are calling on colleagues at the House of Representatives to support their bill repealing what they call anti-poor provisions of the TRAIN law. Among these, the excise tax on fuel and sugar-sweetened beverages and restoration of some value-added tax exemptions. House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Dakila Kua says his committee is reviewing the impact of the TRAIN law.
Kung sa ating pag-aaral ay makita natin ito ay dapat i-suspend, open naman tayo sa possibility niya.
The Finance Department, however, is not open to suspending the law.
And all the President's promises will not be funded. A lot is at stake, and we have infrastructure, free SUC tuition to deliver and all the budget priorities. You lose credibility and you lose all the hard-won reforms and credit rating that you have achieved.
The country's economic managers earlier said the train law only contributed 0.4% in the spike in commodity prices in April. They instead blamed the surge in fuel prices, depreciation of the peso, and profiteering by some businesses. But militant lawmakers are not buying this.
Pumunta sila sa palengke, sabihin nila yan sa tindera doon at namamalengke araw-araw. Baka ihambalo sa kanila yung mahal na presyo ng mabilihin. Kung hindi ito haharapin ng Kongreso, dahil nagmumula naman ito sa Kongreso at ng Duterte administration, magiging isang napakalaking political and electoral issue nito.
Congress only has 3 session days left, a very small window, to take up the bill repealing the train law, before it adjourns for a 2-month break. Joyce Ila, CNN Philippines.